Once upon a time, a few visionary men decided to create something truly worthwhile. They extracted the raw materials from deep within the earth at great personal cost to themselves, and then lovingly formed them into usable metal parts, which they then shipped off by truck to a factory thousands of miles distant, where skilled laborers took these refined metal parts and welded, bolted, and riveted them together into a veritable monument of usefulness and purpose, which served its masters faithfully for decades to come. But then one day, someone decided it had outlived its purpose. Its casing had become dull and rusty, and the drawers didn't work properly. Overall, it was in a pretty sorry state, and so it was unceremoniously hurled into a dumpster with all the other trash, where it would slowly decompose and rot away until all that remained were the barely visible remnants of what once was. It was the sad end to a modern American story that's been repeated millions and millions of times. Or was it? Maybe this wasn't the end. Maybe there was a man, some might say an exquisite physical specimen of a man, which all other men might strive, but fail, to emulate, who had the ability to look beneath the corroded exterior and see the treasure within. This uniquely clever man, who also happened to be extraordinarily humble, carefully extricated the drawer cabinet from its premature metal coffin, took it home to his shop, and transformed what otherwise would have been the end of a sad story into a hopeful new beginning. The thing is, I get it. You've got a certain vision. You're trying to clean up your workspace or your shop or whatever, and you've got a certain vision of how you want it to be, and this thing doesn't fit that vision, and it's like, get it out of here. So the easiest thing is to probably just hurl it into the dumpster, and now it's somebody else's problem, and you can go ahead and have your affair with your brand new chest of drawers, and the old one will never know. But I think we all know inherently that there's some value in taking some old and battered thing that's long past its life cycle and fixing it up and putting it back into service. I'm at the point in my life financially where if I wanted to, I could just buy a really nice, like one of these welding tables, these really nice ones you see like from Fireball Tool or something. These beautiful pieces of industrial magic. But I think that there is some real value in rescuing equipment from the dead and fixing it up and putting it back into service. And we live in a throwaway culture now, and it's more common than it's ever been to just replace things that are broken or maybe just don't look as good as you would like them to. The most important thing to remember about this whole project is that you practice on the passing marker first. Never forget that. But broken things, if they're well made, if they were originally well made, can be fixed. And it's like you're putting a bit of the universe back in order. Now, I don't want to exaggerate here, but I really do think there's a bit of the divine in that. I think we're called to do it by our Creator. This thing was broken and deemed devoid of value, and you're taking that thing and putting inherent value back into it. A byproduct of that is that in the process, you're also making yourself more valuable in a certain way. As you can see right now, these things don't really slide as smoothly as we'd like them to. Probably years of dust and neglect. What I want is for these, I want to give a slight push when I'm done lubricating these rollers and have them slide on in there nicely. Well, this one's really stuck. We'll start with the top one. Okay. I'm just going to spray each one of these rollers. When I was in diesel school, I learned that oil actually prevents metal on metal contact, which seems obvious, but it wasn't obvious to me. So when that piston is reciprocating in the combustion chamber, there's no metal on metal contact. I'm like, what? I mean, there's metal touching metal, but no, there isn't. It's on a molecular level. There's a tiny coating of oil, assuming you fill your engine with oil, which I guess I shouldn't assume. And that protects metal on, or that prevents metal on metal contact, and that's why you can go think of the amount of times over 300,000 miles, or with a diesel engine, maybe up to 1,000,000 miles, that piston goes up and down in the cylinder, and it can, think about how many times every mile it does that. And that is how that piston lasts for so long before the need for a rebuild. Let's say you've got two pieces of metal and you want to join them into a permanent joint. Pretty thick pieces of metal here. You could just put a bead on the top and put a bead on the bottom, but as you can see, there's actually very little penetration. The better way to do this is to put a pretty substantial aggressive bevel on the top of both pieces of metal. And as you can see, that's a wide open, it's now a groove weld instead of a butt joint. You fill that groove in with new metal, and then you go in from the bottom and you back gouge with either a grinder or an arc rig down to the bare metal. Then you add another bead on top of that. So now you've got a full penetration joint. There's no chance of it breaking along that joint. It's as if it grew that way. Is it worthwhile to restore something? Why not just buy a new thing and throw away that old thing? Is there like a moral component to this? And I'm coming at this from, I've thrown plenty of stuff away in my life. I'm guilty as charged. I remember when we were in Iraq, we'd go to the dump right outside the base there. We'd show up with a truck full of what we viewed as junk, and we'd throw all that crap off the back of the truck, even though there was probably something, there's probably basically nothing wrong with it. It didn't work exactly how we wanted it to, and we knew it was easier to just buy a new thing. So we'd dump all that stuff off the back of the truck, and there'd be a group of Iraqis just waiting for us to leave. We'd see them as we're pulling out of there, loading that stuff, all that junk, what we call junk, onto the back of their trucks, and guaranteed within a half hour of getting it back to wherever they were taking it, they had it in working order again. And I have to believe that those guys, in addition to being happy that we dropped that stuff off, I think probably that happiness was accompanied by a slight bit of contempt for us, spoiled rich Americans. And I can't say I really disagree with that. I think anybody that's been poor or hungry views things in this regard in a different light. If you've ever been hungry or known or been influenced by somebody who was, you notice that they treat things that center around food a lot differently than your typical, kid that's kind of growing up in the lap of luxury. There's a book I read about the sinking of the whale ship Essex, which was a real life Moby Dick. It basically was the inspiration for the story Moby Dick, because in real life a whale actually sank a whaling ship by ramming into it, marooned a bunch of the whalers into longboats in the middle of nowhere. About as far away from anywhere as you can get, and they had basically no provisions and desperately hungry, desperately thirsty. And I do remember one of the most terrible things about the book was the description of what happens to the human body during extreme hunger and thirst. Pretty horrifying stuff. I think the thing that stands out most in my mind is the aftermath, when a lot of these guys died, but some survived. And when they got back to their ports of origin, the thing that you observe is how they were changed forever. One description was, there was one guy who, when he got back home, for the rest of his life, he lived for another, 30 years or something, he would incessantly and neurotically hoard bits of food. He would hide them throughout the house. The thought of somebody with that history ever again throwing away food is just completely absurd. And that might be a bit extreme, but I think anybody who's been hungry or poor just has a much more profound appreciation of the value of things that required effort to produce. I think the overwhelming conclusion is, yes, it's definitely worth our while to restore things. It's worth the effort. There's some inherent value in that. Piece by piece, little by little, you're wiping away the layers of disorder and decomposition that are 100% guaranteed to occur eventually to any given thing. And you're consciously reimposing that composition and order on that thing. And the interesting thing about this is that whatever the thing is, it definitely will not be enthusiastic about your efforts, though. It will spend all of its time and effort resisting you. And you've got to deny the urge to fly into a rage and just destroy the whole project. And instead realize that, well, of course it's resisting you. I mean, there's really nothing in this world that wants to remain ordered. I mean, think of your car or your disgusting bathroom or your own mind or your wife's hair. These are all things that would like nothing better than to exist in a state of complete disarray. Keeping something in order takes deliberate and conscious time and effort. But I think, most would agree that it's more than worth our time. It was taking forever to get this tabletop positioned correctly. I went around that tabletop like 15,000 times, and it was still off for some reason on one side. And finally I realized that I had tacked in one of the tabletop supports at the wrong angle. And so here I am wedging that table support against the drawer cabinet case and retacking. Pretty sure that was my son's fault. Not exactly sure how, but it was definitely his fault. Have you ever made something or fixed something and then afterward just stared at it for long periods of time? You felt strong, didn't you? You felt able. You felt energized, like, man, I did that. You look around and you think, well, what other awesome things can I do? My wife's caught me out there in the shop after I completed a project, maybe sometimes days after I completed it, and I'm just staring at it, just dreaming or thinking about how cool this thing is. And, man, I made that. It energizes you. It makes you feel a certain kind of power, like we're realizing something within ourselves that we're supposed to develop. I wanted to make kind of a slide out tool rack. I think it's a good use of the dead space underneath the cabinet. So I'm using a galvanized steel sheet here, and I'm just preparing the spot where the handle's going to go. I used, for the handle, I thought it'd be a cool touch to use an old sprocket that I got from this motorcycle repair shop that I used to work at part-time when I was going through diesel school. A little bit of an industrial touch there. Got a small level sitting on that bottom slide to make sure I get the positioning right. I don't care if it's level to the cabinet itself. I need it to be level with the world because it will affect how that tool rack slides in and out. I considered whether to bolt or to weld those drawer slides on. Just didn't really relish the idea of drilling 17 holes. Sloth is a powerful force of nature, I'd say. You may notice if you look at the final product that there are slight differences in how I mounted the tools from what I'm doing here. And that's because I realized only too late that if you don't take steps, those tools are going to smash into each other when you open and close it. And definitely don't want that. So I used different mounting systems for some of the tools. I incorporated magnets, such as with the vice grips, in an effort to keep them from, injuring themselves. Out with the old. And in with the new. All in all, a worthwhile project. And now the legacy of this drawer cabinet gets to live on. So let me know if there's something that you'd like to see, or I'm also interested in things that you've done or things that you'd like to do, ideas that you have, so I can steal them. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.